This program is sponsored by the Church of God International and supported by our viewers.
In our world today, we see a lot of evil on display, whether on the streets in a variety of forms, or just simply random acts of violence throughout the many cities of our country. Yes, evil indeed is on display for all of us to see. A contributing factor to this rise in evil is the ever-increasing interest and acceptance in the popularity of occultism and mysticism. A recent Pew Research study found a growing percentage of Americans believe in astrology, psychics, and the presence of spirits. Amazingly, 6 out of every 10 Americans now believe in one of these areas. Actually, the occult is becoming mainstream. There is a large number of people, including celebrities and popular societal icons, that have adopted an occult or follow the Wiccan or pagan practices of adhering to the many ideals of these spiritual disciplines. Interestingly, according to the BBC, Witch Talk videos have now exceeded over 30 billion views as recent as in 2022. Witch Talk is a subculture of pagans that use TikTok to share spells, learn about mythology, and connect with other individuals that perform magic in the tradition of heathenry and Wicca. But just how harmful is all this dalliance and or acceptance of occultism and mysticism to ourselves, our families, and society? Is there a downside to this? And just where did all this information come from? Stay with us as we attempt to answer these questions on today's program.
In times like these, we need the armor of God for the well-being of our families, to help you stand in the evil day. The Church of God International presents Armor of God, a program of biblical understanding. And now your host, Bill Watson.
Well, hello, and again, welcome to another international telecast of the Armor of God. Good to be with all of you once again. What if I was to tell you, my friends, that we have aliens walking among us? Now, I know some of you may say, Bill, you're crazy. You've gone off the rails. While others of you that are probably more pragmatic would say, well, of course we do. We've got 17 to 20 million of them coming across the southern borders from Mexico. And I get that. I understand. We're not going to digress into that because I don't have the time. That's another story because, quite frankly, I don't even call them aliens. I call them foreign nationals. But as I say, that's another story. Point being, what I'd like to talk about are the non-human aliens. Not aliens from another planet. No, not Mars or Venus, not from Jupiter or from Pluto, but aliens that come from another dimension. Spirit beings that live in a different matrix. Some of us would call it perhaps a parallel universe, where the Bible describes them as Satan and his minions, fallen angels in disfavor with God. The Bible's loaded with all kinds of information regarding Satan the devil and these demons, fallen angels, as I say, and even good angels, angels that are still in favor with God and, quite frankly, are also sharing that same time and space. But the Bible is clear. One third of the whole holy host went with this Hallel. That's the Hebrew for, in the Latin translated Lucifer. We know it as light bringer. That's what the word means, to illuminate, to bring light. A day star even can be interpreted from the Hebrew name Hallel or the Latin Lucifer. The fact of it is, in Genesis chapter, what you could say about 3 or so, in verse 1, we're told that he's also a Nakish, which was translated into a serpent. Not the best translation because it comes from a base Hebrew word, Nahash. And Nahash simply means also a whispering spirit. someone who is a whispering enchanter, somebody who is highly charismatic and influential and is able to persuade. And we know the story behind that and what he did with Eve, in all due respect, and how he influenced her into essentially disobeying God. But the bottom line is, he knows our weaknesses. Oh yes, Satan, the devil, he does indeed play on those weaknesses all the time. He understands that we have problems with our vanity, with our ego. We're conceited in some respects and narcissistic by nature. There's a certain element about human beings that want to be satisfied. They want to be comfortable. When we're cold, we want to be warm. When we're hungry, we want to be fed. We're self-centered in that respect. And we always are oftentimes looking out for number one rather than others around us. So I want to take a little bit of time today and talk about Satan and some of his methods, some of the tools that he uses to get at you and I, because don't kid yourself, my friends. He wants to get to you. He wants to take you out and cancel you if he can. But before I do, I'd like to interrupt myself, as we normally do here, to present to you two offers. And today, not unlike our other programs, we have some offers for you that I'd like to present. They're both free as usual. One is a piece of literature titled What You Should Know About Demon Possession. And the other is a 1-hour presentation before a live audience, as a matter of fact, titled In Enemy Territory. It goes into quite a bit of detail of the environment that you and I are dealing with in this day and age, surrounded by the unseen world, this unseen matrix, this parallel universe that somehow seems to always have influences upon so many of us. Both of these offers are free, and as I said, all you've got to do is dial 888-578-8791 and leave us your contact information and ask for these offers. Or, more conveniently and quicker by far, you can just download them right off of our website at cgi.org. That's right, www.cgi.org, and you'll probably have them in your hands before the program is over. Don't forget also about our app. It's a very good app. It's very good in terms of making it convenient for you to navigate through our website on your mobile devices, be it your telephone and your iPads. Very, very simple. All you've got to do is go to many of the app stores that you're familiar with, Apple and so on, and download it there. And it too is free. So my friends, let me just one more time here, 888-578-8791. Get these two offers, What You Should Know About Demon Possession and the CD In Enemy Territory. Now, we've been talking a little bit here about Satan the devil and his means and methods of getting to us. And don't kid yourself, as I said, he wants to get at us. He would like, in every respect, if he can, to be able to distract us, to be able to get us off the rails, and as I said, essentially to go ahead and take us out, to cancel us, to disqualify us from achieving the goal of entering into God's kingdom. Now, over here in the book of Colossians, and I'd like to bring your attention there to chapter 2 especially, because this focuses a little bit on some of the methods that Satan the devil uses in order to get at us. And here in verse 8, it's brought to our attention that we need to beware. Oh yeah, Paul writes to these Christians in Colossae and says this, "Beware, lest any man spoil you," he says, "through philosophy and vain deceit, after the traditions of men." And this is what Satan does. He uses the things around us to essentially attempt to influence and distract us into becoming against, or what you could say in opposition to what God wants us to be feeling and thinking. Paul goes on here in verse 8 and he says, "After the traditions of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ." And that's to my point, my friends, in respect to the fact that Satan the devil would like to get your mind off of God. He wants your mind off of Christ and on the things that he wants you to be thinking, because so often we as human beings don't realize that our fight is not in the physical world. Notice over here, Ephesians, I've already turned there to chapter 2, and in verse 1, we read this, because these are the means and the methods by which Satan the devil uses tools in his toolbox to get to our conscience, to get to our emotions. And those are the two major windows, by the way, that Satan the devil uses in order to modify, in order to manipulate, in order to drive us into areas that we shouldn't go. Notice what Paul says to these Ephesians in the city of Ephesus. Verse 1, chapter 2, he says this, "And you has he quickened who were dead in your trespasses and sins, wherein in time past, the assumption here Paul is making to these people he's writing is that these are no longer things that they are involved with. In other words, they are in the past. But nevertheless, he continues on here and he says, walked according to the course of this world. That is in the past. You walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince, notice this description here, of the power of the air, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. Of all things, there's another part in your Bible where the Bible calls Satan the devil, the god of this world. For the time being, we know that Jesus Christ came and is now at the right hand of the Father, sitting there qualified as King of Kings and Lord of Lords, and is on a countdown, by the way, to return to this planet and take his rightful position that he's qualified for already to almost 2,000 years ago. But nevertheless, does not dismiss the fact Satan the devil in the meantime is definitely, you could say, in the minds of many people today, the god of this world. Over in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9, I'm not going to turn there for the sake of time, but the fact of it is there, we are told that he is successfully maneuvering, successfully positioned himself to where he has deceived the whole world, it says there in Revelation 12, verse 9. Look it up if you've got a Bible and go ahead and read it for yourself. It's amazing, my friends. We're not just talking about the United States of America here. We're talking about the whole world. He has in his hands for the time being. Mankind is so blinded to these events and means by which he, Satan the devil, influences his particular means and uses. In Ephesians here in chapter 6, and I'd like to turn your attention again over here in chapter 6, where it says in verse 12, we don't wrestle, he says, not against flesh and blood. Our wrestling match is not with flesh and blood. He continues on, he says, but it's against principalities, against the powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places, or wicked spirits in high places. And so you see and begin to understand that most people, they don't realize this. These two scriptures, the Revelation 12:9 and Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, most people, it goes right over their heads. They don't see Satan the devil in the world that we are living in. They don't see him in politics. They don't see him in the entertainment industry. They don't see him in our educational systems. They don't see him in ways that people relate to one another and in the way that they process information, how he influences from other people through their mind, thoughts, and emotions, moods that manipulate, oftentimes rearrange attitudes that you might find yourself in that all of a sudden change out of the blue, not really recognizing or realizing what in the world got into him, you wonder. And you have that terminology, you wonder, you look at the newspapers and you see some of these mass killings, you look at some of the stories or read some of the stories in the news and you wonder to yourself, how can people do things to other people like that? And people often say, I wonder what got into him. He was such a nice guy. I can't believe that he or she did those kinds of things to other people. But yet, nevertheless, it does indeed happen that way. And clearly, my friends, clearly, The day and age that we're living in today has accelerated. If you're like me, you've noticed the evil has accelerated all around us, all around us. And today, if nothing else, I'd like to just take some time to warn us about some of these methods, some of these tools, some of these means by which Satan the devil uses in order to get in your head and to get into our feelings. Because again, I say and remind us all, we need to be very protective of our thoughts. We need to be very protective of our feelings, because it is by these two windows that Satan the devil attempts to leverage his influence into what we think and into what we feel in order to steer and change our attitude and approach toward the things whatever we may be involved with. Now, I don't have a lot of time, my friends, to go into a lot of detail about all of the tools that are in Satan's toolbox. But I do want to present to you one method, one means by which he is indeed using, simply because it's on the increase. As a matter of fact, there was a study, the most recent data that I was able to get was from 1990 to about 2008. And the fact that occultism has gained such interest that between those years of 1990 and 2008, some data show it has increased to the point of 40-fold. 40 times in its size and scope. People becoming more interested in Wiccan and in paganism, becoming more interested in Satanism, and actually even in ritualistic worship of Satan the devil, to the point, my friends, it's hard to believe, of even human sacrificing today. That's right. In the 21st century, of all things, as hard as that is to believe, the fact remains is that there are people that are involved in cults, involved in occultism, involved in mysticism, and actually diverting their attention into the study of Satan the devil. One of these off-the-wall, off-the-grid religious movements that are indeed used, or is indeed used, for tripping people up and confusing people is Kabbalah. Now, I'm going to pick on Kabbalah a little bit. The reason being is because it's an outgrowth of Judaism, of all things. That's right. And Christianity was actually, back in the day, considered an outgrowth of Judaism. As a matter of fact, many people thought that Christianity was nothing more than an extension of Judaism. Oh yes, my friends, that's right. And in this case, it makes it very, what you could say, I would say, connecting, that Kabbalism would be used to illustrate to you how easily it can be used to deceive, can be used to misdirect and misinform you about God, quite frankly. Here in this particular website, reformedjudaism.org, I'd like to take a moment here just to quote the meaning of what Kabbalah is. Kabbalah, some spell it with a K, others spell it with a C, but it's sometimes translated as mysticism or occult knowledge. That's right. It goes on here it says, is a part of the Jewish tradition that deals with the essence of God, whether it entails sacred texts, an experience, or the way things work. Kabbalists believe that God moves in mysterious ways. However, Kabbalists also believe that the true knowledge and understanding of the inner mysterious process is obtainable. And through that knowledge, the greatest intimacy with God can in fact be attained. The quote goes on and it says, the investigative aspect of Kabbalah involves searching that hidden reality of the universe for secret knowledge about its origins and its organization, a quest that is more esoteric than mystical. In Jewish tradition, there are three ways esoteric knowledge can be obtained. Number one, by interpreting sacred texts to uncover the nistar, or the hidden meanings. Number two, by oral transmission of tradition from a Kabbalistic master. And number three, the direct revelation, and this is a killer, listen to this, by the direct revelation, which might include visitations by an angel or Elijah, spirit possession, or either supra-rational experience of all things. That's right, my friends. These are indeed the means and the ways of the way Satan, the devil, influences us. Now, Kabbalah is no different than a group of people back in the early Genesis of the church, back in the first century, that's right, where the apostles had to deal with these individuals that were involved with gnosis. Gnosis, that's right, my friends. And that term gave these particular people the sense of Gnostics. That's why they were labeled to be Gnostics. And these were somewhat esoteric folks. They were people that were what you could say considered themselves spiritual. They looked at things in a very esoteric and a very abstract fashion, and actually felt that they were indeed led to believe certain things about God that they felt needed to be shared. And as a result, some of the writings are the result, in some cases, that bring us understanding of how that early New Testament church was in fact infiltrated with some of these false doctrines that the disciples, and you can make the case of the New Testament being a document that was defending, that's right, the whole New Testament church's teachings in those early years of the church. But the fact remains that it, like I say, is no different than that first century. Many of those books, like the Book of Tobin, they're called the Apocrypha books, Esdras, and of course Enoch, they drove people to think certain things about the Bible that really wasn't true. But they would take things from the Bible. They would take things from the Bible like the 7 trumpets in Revelation, or the 7 vials. In Revelation 8, the trumpets, or Revelation 16, they had the 7 vials. And they would build off of that and introduce names of 7 archangels. You and I are very familiar with Gabriel and Michael, but there's Raphael, and there's also Remiel, and Uriel, and Raquel. These are names that have been assigned by some of these Gnostics that claimed exist. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. I do know the Bible mentions Gabriel and Michael, but I'm not quite sure about the others. The point being is that they were, that is from these Gnostics anyway, portrayed as existing. And like I said, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that these types of methods and tools, even Aleister Crowley and his Thelema cult that he basically generated in the early 20th century, has influenced today people that you may know by name in some respects that have indeed been followers of this particular individual. Let me show you in some cases the fact of how they themselves were in fact influenced by Madonna, of course, and some Ashton Kutcher, and others, Lindsay Lohan. These are just a few that have been influenced by Aleister Crowley. As a matter of fact, you remember his face on the album cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. That was there as well. He even was essentially talked or basically referenced on the Led Zeppelin vinyl on the do what you will, because that's how Crowley lived. Anything goes, everything goes. Crowley was a sex maniac. He dealt with drugs. He was kind of a guy that was considered to be one of the most evil men that existed back in the early 20th century. His legacy precedes him in reputation. Even as a matter of fact, David Bowie referenced him in the lyrics Quicksand, that music, that song, and Ozzy Osbourne paid tribute to him with a whole song titled Mr. Crowley. So these are things, my friends, that we can see in this day and age whereby you and I are influenced without even realizing it. Oh yeah, oh yeah. And this is why I wanted to bring it to our attention, because we're not even in some cases aware of how Satan influences us because it's so innocuous. It's so subtle. This guy, this entity, is genius. He's got the whole world fooled into thinking he doesn't exist. How about that for an activity of success? He's invisible to all of mankind. In many respects, people do not see him working behind the scenes. My friends, it is important as Christians that we go ahead here, and let me bring your attention as we close this out in Colossians and in chapter 2 over here, in chapter 3, the book of Colossians, and in chapter 3, I just want to remind all of us today that we need, that is, if we are indeed risen with Christ, that we seek those things which are above, where Christ sits at the right hand of God, setting our affections on things above, not on things of the earth. Get your mind off the material. Get your mind off of the physical. Get your mind on Christ and use Him as the very example, the very template that you need to abide by and follow. And in so doing, Satan, the devil's influences and his effects on you will be minimized. What does the Bible say? Draw close to God, and the devil will flee from you. My friends, time has run out on me. Go ahead, go ahead and dial, that is. Dial 888-578-8791. Get those free offers that we presented to you earlier. What you should know about demon possession, and a 1-hour presentation presented with a live audience in enemy territory. Both are free for the asking. You can download them off of our website as well at cgi.org. All you've got to do is take the time to go ahead there and do it, and you'll probably get it much, much quicker. My friends, this is Bill Watson, reminding all of you, as we often do, you stand strong in these evil days that we're in, and put on that whole armor of God so that you may be able to deflect the wiles of Satan, the devil.
Armor of God and the free material offered is brought to you by the Church of God International of Tyler, Texas. You may write to us at 3900 Timms Street, Tyler, Texas 75701, or call toll-free at 1-888-578-8791, or call 1-903-939-2929 during regular business hours. You may visit our website at www.cgi.org or email us at armorofgodcgi.org. We appreciate your prayers and support.
This program is sponsored by the Church of God International and supported by our viewers.